Signing up for a primate project. Here's a look at the McFarlane Toys Spawn Mega Action Figure of Cygor. Michael Knizia was Al Simmons' friend and squad mate. When he discovered the truth of Al's murder, he attempted to blow the whistle on Jason Wynn. However, he was stopped and subjected to Project Sim, the simian experiments of Frederick Wilhelm, and became the beast known as Cygor, short for cybernetic gorilla. Before we stop to look at Cygor, let's first figure out how tall the figure stands. To be fair, though, I actually did take this guy out of the packaging and I put him in a more appropriate gorilla pose, as the figure was more upright when you first take him out of the packaging. That being said, let's go ahead and grab now the tape measure just to see how tall the figure stands. And in the position that I've got him right now, Cygor is 7.5 inches in height. And to spin that around, it works out to be about a figure that's 19 centimeters tall. Just going to bring in a couple of figures right now for comparisons of sizes. This is what Cygor looks like next to the mega-sized Violator. Again, the differences wouldn't be as extreme if I had Cygor more higher up or standing more upright like he would have appeared in the packaging. And to also show you what it looks like next to a smaller scale figure, this is what he looks like next to the Clown. Clown is dwarfed in size. And in case you guys also want to see what it looked like next to, say, a larger scale DC multiverse figure, let's bring in the previously looked at Clayface, who isn't all that much bigger than Cygor when you think about it. Cygor certainly is a bigger sized figure, closer, I think, in size to Clayface, just a little bit shorter than Violator, at least in the pose that I've got him in right now. Cygor does get himself a display stand, in case you are curious. Although it's the same size of display stand, honestly, as all the other McFarlane releases we've gotten so far. And I almost feel like, again, it's a bit redundant. The size of this, and then if you were to, say, take the sizing of Cygor's feet, and you put the display stand underneath it, well, the stand itself is completely lost by Cygor's big gorilla feet. It almost, again, doesn't even seem necessary. I understand if they did want to make a larger scale stand, then that's something, of course, to talk about. But if they can continue to use these smaller sized stands, Cygor, first of all, doesn't even need a stand. He stands fine on his own. But then to include a stand like that makes absolutely no sense, when I think the plastic would be better suited to be used for an accessory instead. By the way, FYI, Cygor doesn't also come included with a trading card. It doesn't seem to be the case that with a lot of Spawn releases, we are getting trading cards. That seems more than, if anything, more dedicated towards the DC multiverse releases. But yes, while he does come included with a display stand, I just don't really think it's all that necessary. By the way, it does have the Spawn logo across the top there, and one singular peg that's going to plug into either one of his giant-sized gorilla feet. Getting a closer look, though, at Cygor. Not a more recent figure. It's been a bit around for a while. I just haven't had yet the chance to pick this guy up. Finally getting this guy in hand. I've always been really fascinated when it comes to gorilla characters, gorilla villains. A big fan of Gorilla Grodd, certainly. And when it comes to gorilla figures, there's few and far between. We don't get a whole lot of them out there. More really dedicated to Gorilla Grodd. Not so much dedicated to Cygor here. So we finally get ourselves a really oversized beast of a Cygor. I gotta say, the figure looks fantastic. First of all, starting things off, let's first have a look at the head sculpt here for Cygor. You can see there's a few little gash wounds there on the top of his forehead. He's colored quite nicely, at least for the gorilla side that we see. The metallic side of gorilla, certainly as you can see there, he does have the plating on the one side of his face that also allows almost a similar sort of mask to what Kano would have had from Mortal Kombat, kind of like the common similarities between the two characters. He does certainly have a lot of damage done to his body. I'm going to just kind of bring his arms out slightly so you guys can see. He has all these interesting stitches that go across the front of his torso, down the side of his shoulder, down the sides of his legs, and even across his lower belly or undercarriage here as well. He looks like he has certainly gone through a lot of experimenting to get him the look that he is right now. Where there is, of course, the metallic augmentation here of the character is really nicely presented here with some brushing of like a silver over top of a darker gray. Really, it's simple the way they paint these things, because really, when you consider it, he's probably using all the same plastic color as, well, just the back end of him at least, but he's probably using that same color, and then they just dry brushed over top of it the silver, giving us the effect that we have. There is a little bit of bleed where you can see where instead of having the separation clean and sharp, there's a little bit of that silver bleed that's bled onto the body of the gorilla, but it's very few and far between. There's not very many areas that I'm seeing here on this gorilla as we look at his giant gorilla behind. There's not a lot of areas where I see like the paint is a mess. Although, to be fair, really, the parts that are painted in silver are painted only in silver. There really could have used, as I've always said before when we look at these McFarlane releases, there's really always an opportunity. I feel they could have added like a darker wash of like a darker black. And really, it's counterintuitive because really they are painting essentially a black plastic with the silver over top of it. But I still feel there's an opportunity missed here by not going in there and adding then a wash of darker black over top of it. Really allowing, not so much here, because I feel here has done enough of a job well. But I think areas like this, there's so much interesting sculpt happening here that it really is only left just to the silver to get the job done. There are a few little areas like the top tubing here that's done in gold, but all the rest of it is really only kept and relegated to the silver. And I feel there's really an opportunity that they could have gone in there and really added some darker contrasting colors. That's something you're really not experiencing as much when you're seeing the figure. It's got some really cool looking sculpting, but I feel like the paint feels slightly unfinished, at least on the metallic side of Cygor. Of course, it's not just on this one side that he has all the metal added additional parts. He does have it also in this arm as well. You can see like there's tubes and little nozzles and stuff sticking out the sides of his arms, for example. He's got some additional tubing done also here in gold. But would it kill them at all to add just a little bit of darker coloring on top of this? I never really want to start playing around with figures to the point where I'm going in there and touching up figures with paint. But I feel like a character like Cygor, he's had so much good stuff going on with the sculpting here. I really feel like, again, they needed to go in there and added some much appreciated darker coloring. The face sculpt, though, as we've already talked about before. Now, this one does have him with the open mouth. This is certainly one of those cases, again, where I don't feel like you would really want to have hinged the jaw, because it would have certainly been the case where having this jaw open and close, you really would have lost all the really nice sculpting that they put to the interior of the mouth with the teeth so sharply sculpted there on the top, and even the nicely painted tongue down below there. I'm really glad that they didn't actually put a hinge joint in here. There could have been maybe an opportunity, yes, that they could have had a swappable head sculpt that you could have just popped off and then replaced with another one. This Cygor is getting re-released, I think, a couple of times already, where he's going to get a different color scheme. Maybe there could have been an opportunity at some point down the road that they could have actually had a swappable head sculpt. Why am I doing this? A swappable head sculpt where they could have given him a slightly different expression, like maybe one with a mouth closed instead. Running through the articulation, though, on Cygor, we're going to start things off first with his head sculpt. I was pleasantly surprised to see that the ball joint works as well as it does. I mean, when you take it out of the packaging, you would just assume a head this size, this gorilla head after all, wouldn't be able to really move all that much. But surprising to find, the ball joint works quite well to allow the head to hinge back and forth this way, up and down. And you can also rotate it all the way around. Now, to take this guy initially out of the packaging, I had already stated that the guy was sort of more upright like this. I prefer myself to have him more leaning forward, and at least the head didn't disappoint, because if the head was only looking down like this, there'd be really no way to successfully pull off a proper gorilla pose. I really was happy to see that you could hinge the head as far forward as you could to really give him in that proper knuckle walking that gorillas are known for having. Having a look, though, at his shoulders. Now, the shoulders are on hinge joints, but they don't come out all that much. That's it. You missed it? Let's do it again. That's it. Granted, yes, you can rotate the arms all the way around. They are a little on the tighter side, just simply because you're dealing with so much more molding of plastic here. He does have a single hinge on the elbows that does allow the elbows to be either straight, the arms straight, or, again, you can have them more forward, as the way a proper gorilla would be. There is arm articulation here, but there is no bicep swivel. I can certainly understand they didn't want to break up the nice sculpting that they did put in there. And then, of course, when it comes to his knuckles, his hands themselves, we didn't spend any bit of time talking about his hands. There's no individual joints at all on the fingers. He is always going to be in the pose of having his weight all on the knuckle end of his hands. So when it comes to his hand rotation, he only has just a swivel this way and a hinge joint that allows the hands to go up this way. If you wanted just to have the hands forward like this, you really can't get a successful looking. Oh, it definitely looks like he's not. It almost looks like he's supposed to pound it off. Like, hey, bro, it's good to see you again. But really, like, the whole purpose, I understand, of this is simply just so he's going to be putting all his weight on his knuckles. The upper torso is on a very generous ball joint. Any little bit of criticism I could also offer up would be the fact that he does have, once again, the softer plastic sort of lower diapers that a lot of these figures have. There are a few little areas where you sort of see like the gappage between the harder plastic and the softer plastic that's on the back behind the back booty of Cygor. A little small little criticism. There's really no way they would have been able to work around that other than just narrowing the gap. And then, of course, you would have to have a much more mileage being able to rotate on the torso. I can understand why that gap, unfortunately, has to be there. The legs are on hinge joints. Technically, you could have him standing straight on his hind legs if you wanted to. The legs go out slightly, I guess more than just slightly. He does have a hinge joint on the lower end of his knee. Doesn't allow the rotation of the lower leg, but at least you can rotate his feet, and those feet also move back and forth also as well. Again, some really nice sculpting on the undersides of the figure's feet. Not really all that many complaints, to be honest, with this figure. I really like the way that Cygor turned out. Maybe, yes, there could have been an opportunity, I think, presented where they could have given him maybe a different head sculpt, but I think that's something that they could also release down the road as one of their gold label releases, because this guy, like all the other Spawn releases, is going to get a second, probably a triple dipping when it's all said and done. Slightly different color scheme to the metallic armor that he has. But yeah, there maybe could be an opportunity down the road. They could give him a different head sculpt as well. I kind of do like the roaring look of the gorilla, to be all honest. And to be fair, like really for his size too, I was surprised how much articulation this guy actually possesses. At the end of the day, I'm probably either going to have him posed like this with one arm up, or if anything, I'm just going to have the arms down and just have him displayed like that. And for that, he really didn't need as much articulation that he does have, so I'm glad to see that they were able to cram in as much posability as they did to give us a fine-looking Cygor to put on display. There is something really fascinating about a cybernetic gorilla. It doesn't have to even necessarily be a gorilla, just the idea of taking an animal and augmenting it with weaponry or armor just makes the character a little bit more interesting. Now, Cygor, of course, of his size and stature, you would almost even be surprised to find that this guy is as articulated as he is, as I already looked at here in this review. The thing I was the most happy with was the articulation in his head. Just because, again, like, how disappointing would it have been to get this guy out standing on his hind legs, on his two bottom legs, and then want to move him forward in that natural gorilla pose, and then his head is always going to be looking down. How bit of a bummer would that have been? But no, in fact, he does have what seems to be a dumbbell ball joint on the inside cavity of his head that allows at least the gorilla head to look upright and give him the proper pose that he deserves. Again, the only thing I would really have said about this particular figure is he really needs some additional paint. Because really, when you're looking at it, I would imagine that they probably have used that darker gray, the same coloring that they use for his fur, kind of that off-black color. And that's probably the whole entire molding of the figure. And then, of course, they have gone in there and painted the parts that, of course, are metallic. So they've added the silver there. And then there's really not much other paint other than just the gash wounds and the stitched up sections of his body. I still think I want to go in there. How much do I want to go in there? I think I still want to go in there, maybe with a paintbrush, a darker little wash of watered down black paint, and just fill in some of those nooks and crannies, because there's so much good sculpting going on here that it feels so much gets left off the table because they only applied just that one bit of silver coat paint. They really needed to go in there. And that, again, that's something we've started to see with a lot of their figures. The paint is good, but it just needs a little extra. It just needs a little extra. And I feel with Cygor here, as good of a figure as this guy is, he just needed a little extra. What do you guys think of Cygor? Let me know down below in the comment section whether you picked this figure up for yourself or just based on this review. What do you guys think of the figure? And of course, if you are new to this channel, you're enjoying the content that you're seeing. If you haven't already done so, make sure you're hitting that subscribe button down below, turn the bell notification on, and come back. Well, we have wrapped up the review for a cybernetic gorilla. Love it. There's definitely going to be a lot more McFarlane toy reviews coming your way in the not so distant future. As always, thanks for watching. See you guys next time.